House Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila has described the sex for grace scandal at the University of Lagos as a moment of reckoning for Nigerian lecturers. A civil rights group says some international non-governmental organizations are in cahoots with insurgent groups in the country. On the international scene, U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to obliterate Turkey's economy if it fails to do what it promised in the Syrian war. And in sports, Falcons crash out of Tokyo Olympics.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. President Muhammad Buhari has presented the 2020 budgets to the National Assembly. The nearly 9 trillion naira federal budget is about 27 billion naira less than last year's budget. The president said the budget is based on an exchange rate of 305 naira to the dollar, a real gross domestic growth of 3.1% and inflation rate of 9.98%. Federal debt servicing will eat up about a quarter of the budget, while capital expenditure will swallow 2 trillion naira. The president also outlined a proposed recurrent expenditure of 4 trillion naira, statutory transfer of just under half a trillion naira, and a sinking fund of 120 billion naira. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, has reacted to the sex for grade scandal at the University of Lagos as a moment of reckoning for Nigerian lecturers. A former sub-dean of the Faculty of Art and head pastor of the local Foursquare Gospel Church, Dr. Boniface Igbebugu, did not realize it was playing into the hands of a television investigative team when he demanded sex from a BBC reporter who posed as a 17-year-old admission seeker. He was caught on tape demanding sex from her. The 13-minute video has since gone viral. Speaker Gbajabiamila condemned the act and lashed out at those lecturers whom he described as denying victimized students their sense of self-worth. He said such acts leave the students with psychological wounds. Following sexual harassment case, Foursquare Gospel Church has asked Dr. Boniface to step down. The University of Lagos has also suspended the lecturer indefinitely while a panel of this investigation looks into the scandal. Meanwhile, Ekiti Governor's wife, Bisi Fayemi, has also condemned the Sex for Grades Act. She acknowledged facing sexual harassment while a university student. Fayemi said the act was not pleasing and said she cried because she was quite aware of what the young women go through, having experienced it herself while passing through the Nigerian university system. The First Lady said the three words that came to her while watching the video were voice to speak up and speak out, accountability, whether as parents, guidance, counselors, teachers and leaders in any sector of society, and justice for victims, whom she also described as survivors. Mrs. Fayemi said a register to name and shame sex offender has been set up in Ekiti State. She says other states would follow Ekiti's example and do the same. A civil rights group's Coalition for Good Governance and Change has made an explosive allegation that some international non-governmental organizations have been passing classified military information to the Boko Haram sect. The group says that is why fighting the war against insurgency in the country has been difficult. The group is calling for a probe of international NGOs operating in Borno State. The coalition has expressed worry about the activities of some international NGOs in the northeastern part of the country. The group's convener, Princess Ajibola, said at a news conference in Abuja, the activities of some of the NGOs encourage terrorists to continue carrying out attacks against Nigerians. She also accused the international NGOs of helping to advance the ability of the terrorist group to recruit new fighters. The coalition has called on the National Assembly to stand against what it described as a threat to the nation. Emir of Kano, Mohammed Sanusi II, has also addressed insecurity in the nation during a roundtable session at the Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja on Monday. The emir blamed the huge population of Nigeria for the increasing spate of kidnapping, drugs, banditry and armed robbery in the country. Sanusi said all current social vices, including the Boko Haram insurgency, herdsmen, farmers, clashes, drug addiction and out-of-school children had direct bearing to the consequences of population. The emir said Nigeria should stop coaching population as an asset. He calls it a liability, as the nation's problems are all tied to it. He said the country should have to figure out how to turn these problems around to become a productive force. The monarch said the greatest developmental challenge the country faces is the population problem. He said without a demographic transition, the nation cannot have economic transition. With poor electricity supply from the national grid in Nigeria, most businesses and households in the country get their power from electric generators. But the noise and pollution are unbearable, and many are now turning to solar energy, which is a cleaner, quieter and cheaper alternative. Reporter Deji Badmos has more.
Inside this bakery known as Fifi's Oven in Lagos, the workers are hard at work. Every machine being used here needs electricity to function. Without it, the bakery would be out of business. But guess what is powering the operation here? It is this small generator. It's annoyingly noisy and disturbs everyone. But they've got no choice.
And we have a smaller generator. And we also
Rashid works for an internet service provider. He oversees operations at one of his company's base stations, which requires 2 generators and a battery inverter to run.
For most of the time, do you run on these generators and inverter, or you run on public power supply? For how many hours would you say you run on electricity a day?
Actually, if I may give you an example, for the past 2 months, we hardly run on national provided electricity at all because of the erratic nature of the power supply. So we run 24/7 on our generators and the power inverter backup.
And that's serious. It must be costing you money to do that.
Yeah, 24 hours is like 50 liters of diesel per day. And if you factor that into how much we're spending on diesel alone, not to talk about the...
And that's for the diesel generator, not to talk about the petrol generator.
Yes, and for the diesel, that's about almost 11,000 naira every day.
It's estimated that about 60 million Nigerians own generators, including 26% households and 86% businesses. And with just between 3,500 to 5,000 megawatts of power available daily from the national grid, it's practically impossible to run a business in this country, no matter how small, without a generator. Solar inverter systems, which are cleaner and non-polluting, are beginning to make an inroad in Nigeria. Solar panels are popping up on rooftops across the country, but the high cost is inhibiting its wide usage.
But when you look at the cost over a period of time, say a year or two, you'd find out that what you would have spent on maintaining your generator in terms of fuel, maintenance costs, changing oil and all that, you would have spent it once on inverter, and then over time you don't spend anything else.
Some solar system merchants are offering flexible payment options to make it easier for people to acquire solar technology for their power need. And because of that, the numbers are gradually going up.
Between buying generators and fueling them, Nigerians are spending $20 billion a year. To put into perspective, that's 5% of our entire GDP. What would happen if we could eliminate that cost? And that's why what you're going to see begin to happen over the next year, next 2 years, is the pace at which solar systems are going up is going to become overwhelming. And of course, more installations begets more installations.
Solar system appears to hold the answer to Nigeria's perennial electricity challenge. So it might indeed just be a matter of time before solar system takes over from these noisy and polluting generators.
Coming up, African news. Bodies of 13 women found after migrants' boat sinks. And later, international news. Trump says that we'll be held to pay if Turkey fails to do what it promised in northern Syria.
You are watching ANN. Dear mommy, you went out that night with the baby in your tummy, but you did not come back. The baby is very fine and she eats and sleeps a lot. Everyone says that you are in a better place, but I miss you so much. I keep asking them, where is the better place? But nobody answers me. Auntie Carrie just hugs me and says, go and play. Mommy, I miss you. Please, when are you coming home?
I still do miss you, Mom. And in honor of your memory, I'm a doctor today working with the MTN Foundation to save mothers and children every day.
Ending mother and child mortality in Nigeria is dear to us. We will keep strengthening this most important bond just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and African Stories. The bodies of 13 women who drowned after a crowded migrant boat capsized in heavy weather in the Mediterranean have been recovered by the Italian Coast Guard. Local authorities said on Monday rescue boats approached it off the South Sicilian coast of Lampedusa. The Coast Guard said rescue vessels had picked up 22 survivors, but feared many others might have died in the accident. This was the latest in a long line of sea disasters to hit migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe. One of the survivors said he had lost her sister and 8-month-old niece in the tragedy. The UN Migration Agency said the ship, which had set sail from Tunisia, had been carrying around 50 Tunisian and West African migrants. Italy is investigating the disaster. UNHCR says more than 1,000 persons have died in the Mediterranean so far this year, most of them trying to cross from Libya to Europe. Tunisians have voted in the country's second parliamentary election since the revolution 8 years ago. It appears there was voter apathy to the election, which may have produced low voter turnout. There have been growing frustration with political parties for failure to solve the country's economic problems. Adnan Chawochi reports from Tunis.
13,450 polling stations opened at 8 a.m. There are thousands of registered voters at this center in the suburbs of the capital city Tunis, where the turnout reached over 45% in the last presidential election.
The voting process is smooth and transparent. We have not recorded any irregularities. The civil society is monitoring the whole process.
At least 3 million registered voters boycotted the first round of the presidential election. Tunisian voters have condemned the behavior of a majority of social networks users who criticized political parties behind their screens without heading to polling stations.
The citizens who reject the existing system of ruling and opposition parties are also responsible for the situation if they do not vote today. We cannot elect the right people if we are passive towards political life. Voting is the solution.
Mariam believes in the power of parliament in changing the reality in Tunisia. She has voted while her 10-year-old son was watching in order to initiate him to the voting process.
I'm voting for change. The new parliament will be responsible for improving the social and economic conditions and boosting investment by appointing a government and creating jobs for over 650,000 unemployed people.
Came to learn and to understand all the steps of the election process. It's a great experience.
Under the terms of the 2014 constitution, Parliament is charged with nominating a prime minister, who is then tasked with forming a government and running day-to-day affairs.
Tunisia has 220 registered political parties, but only 10 of them are fielding candidates in all 33 districts. The election authority has provided all logistical and human means to ensure the integrity of elections.
Mozambique is set to head to the polls in another week, but an escalating insurgency, attacks on political campaigners, and a terrified population are a cause for concern there. While the poll looks on the surface like a simple two-way contest between the long-ruling Frelimo party and the opposition Renano party, analysts say it's a complex situation for the Southern African nation. Head of the African branch of the Terrorism Research and Analysis Consortium, Jasmine Opperman, said the elections won't be free and fair. She also said the election won't bring peace, which this war-torn nation badly needs after decades of conflict between the government and the armed wing of the opposition. Analysts predict a struggle in the seat of power where Frelimo had held power since 1975, but now faces a real risk of losing. But Opperman says she fears a worse fate. Renamo has repeatedly accused Frelimo of abusing government resources to campaign, of manipulating the voters' poll, and of rigging polls. She says this friction may prevent Frelimo from giving up power at this time. Striking Zimbabwean doctors have filed a government ultimatum to return to work on Monday after rejecting a 60% pay rise offer. They say it is not enough to keep up with soaring prices of basic goods. The Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association says the government's offer was ridiculous as it would take their monthly salaries below a 400% salary increase they are demanding. The association says in a statement the government was not willing to address their concerns, but had instead responded with intimidation and threats of disciplinary action or dismissals. Health Minister Obadiah Moyo issued the ultimatum on Saturday, instructing the doctors to return to work on Monday.
When we return, international news. Trump says that we will be held to pay if Turkey fails to do what it promised in northern Syria. And later, sports. Falcons crash out of Tokyo Olympics.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international front, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened on Monday to totally destroy and obliterate the Turkish economy if Ankara took any action he considered off-limits following his decision to withdraw U.S. forces from northeastern Syria. In a series of angry tweets, Trump defended his move, which could open the way for Turkey to launch an attack on Kurdish fighters across the border. The withdrawal was heavily criticized even by Trump's Republican allies as a betrayal of American allies. The withdrawal was swiftly condemned by a bipartisan group of politicians over concerns that it could open the way for a Turkish attack on Kurdish-led forces, long allied with Washington. Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican who is usually vocally supportive of Trump, also calls the decision a disaster in the making. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces warned that Turkish invasion would overturn the victory over the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Kurdish forces were key U.S. allies in defeating Islamic State in Syria. But Turkey regards the Kurdish militias, which dominates the U.S. allied Syrian Democratic Forces, as terrorists. An ugly drama is brewing in the impeachment inquiry into U.S. President Donald Trump's Ukraine phone calls. U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, was to have testified behind closed doors before 3 House committees today on his role in trying to get Ukraine to dig up dirt on Trump's political rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. The State Department has ensured that testimony did not happen by blocking Sondland from attending the hearing. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff calls the action another demonstration of obstruction. Blocking Sondland from testifying may become another article of impeachment against Trump for obstruction of Congress. Schiff says American people deserve to hear from Sondland on his role in the whole scandal. The impeachment probe is focusing on a whistleblower's allegation that Trump leveraged nearly $400 million in aid to secure a promise from Ukraine's president to investigate former Vice President Biden and his son Hunter Biden, who sat on the board of Ukrainian energy company. No wrongdoing has been found against either father or son. The House of Representatives Foreign Affairs, Intelligence and Oversight Committee staff wanted to know why Sunderland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, became involved in dealings with Ukraine, which is not a member of the European Union. A plan by California's biggest utility to cut power on high wind days during the rapidly advancing wildfire season could plunge millions of residents into darkness, and most Californians aren't ready. 13 Northern California counties will suffer this week as Pacific Gas, an electric company, announced it may shut off power this week in response to strong and dry winds posing a fire threat. San Jose Mayor San Licador says nearly 2 million persons in 67 schools could be affected if there were a shutdown from Wednesday. An investigation by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection has identified the company responsible for the fire, which has killed 85 persons and destroyed thousands of structures. Canada is generally regarded as a welcoming place for refugees, but it is now appearing like it is taking a tougher stance as the number of illegal border crossings continues unabated. The country is rejecting more refugee claims from those who crossed its border illegally. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is seeking to dissuade, block and turn back thousands more. The country is also asking for U.S. help in controlling the swelling number of asylum seekers crossing its border illegally. Roy Rittenberg reports from the U.S.-Canada border in northern New York State.
It's 6 a.m. and the bus from New York City is just pulling into Plattsburgh. A few of the passengers get off. They get into taxis waiting to take them some 50 kilometers further north to the border with Canada. Just past sunrise, they begin arriving here at Wroxham Road. A Canadian officer warns this Nigerian family.
It's not a legal way into Canada. It's not a port of entry. If you cross here, you're going to be arrested.
They proceed anyway. It's a scene that gets repeated several times a day, several days a week. These men came from Haiti.
I worked for the government, but I had to leave because my life was in danger.
All right, stop. They're both under arrest because you entered the country illegally.
Before crossing, this Syrian mother and daughter told us they have no other choice.
Take your bag.
Few are willing to open up beyond that.
Half of Wroxham Road is here in the US, the other half is right there in Canada, and the only thing that divides them is this makeshift barrier. The actual crossing is just down the road.
Noticeably missing here are US law enforcement. That's despite Ottawa's request that Washington do something to help stop the thousands of migrants making what Canada calls irregular crossings. Almost 20,000 in each of the past 2 years, spiking as the Trump administration began cracking down on undocumented migrants in the US. And 2019 seems on track to reach that level too, according to official figures. The legal crossing is minutes down the road, adjacent to Champlain. Janet McFetridge, the village's new mayor, explains why many don't go there.
But my understanding is that it would not be granted and they would be turned back to the United States, and then there are different consequences. But there's, I guess you would call it a loophole, that allows you to go to a non-official crossing and ask for asylum. That is what they're doing at this point.
Fetridge is also a longtime activist. For months, she's been coming to Wroxham Road 6 days a week to welcome would-be crossers.
I have no idea who's coming, and all I'm doing is handing out a stuffed animal and a bag of chips. And that's just a little stop in their journey of whatever their decision is to do with their lives. So we're going to walk together right here. You're going to stand right there. Just listen to the police, okay? I believe that I can make a little bit of a positive difference in a difficult situation for some of them at that moment. And if it were me, I think I would hope that somebody would be there to wish me well.
Come in.
Hey, you can come if you want.
Those seeking asylum will not be penalized by Canada for crossing here. In fact, by the end of the day, most will end up in government housing in Montreal. Inevitably, some will be sent home. but others will find a new home, a new road that began where Roxham Road ends.
Still ahead, sports, Super Falcons, crash out of Tokyo Olympics. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, track and field athlete Ese Brume has won Nigeria's first and only medal at the 70th edition of the World Athletics Championship in Doha. Brume became the third Nigerian after Chioma Ajunwa and Blessing Okagbere to make it to the medal round. He leaped 6.91 meters in a long run jump to win the bronze medal. Nigeria's senior women's football team will miss the Olympic Games for the third time in a row after losing on away goals to Ivory Coast. Both teams played out a nil draw in the first leg in Abidjan. The third round results means the reigning African queens will miss the Olympic Games again, the second on the bounce under coach Danjuma. Ivory Coast will take on either Cameroon or the Democratic Republic of the Congo in the fourth round of the qualifying series next month. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.